Dear friend, by now we all ought to ask ourselves, who is Donald J. Trump really? He came from the business world, and in a very short period of time, he conquered the Republican Party and then everything else as well. Now he is suddenly the President of the United States of America, and he does not sound like any other politician. Doesn't look like any other politician. He's something we don't really know about in the world that is equally strange to many of us. We haven't really seen the world the way it looks right now. And the president of most likely the most powerful nation on earth looks like nothing else. So let's take a look at the deepest aspect of the personality of Donald J. Trump. And let's do that by means of his birth chart, because it shows how his wires are really strained, how his matrix, the matrix of his soul, is ingrained into his being by the very first breath that he took when he first came out of his womb, of his mother's womb. So let's now look at the birth chart of Donald J. Trump, and let's see if we find something worthwhile. Here it is. What we see here is one place that's rather empty. There's nothing really going on here in terms of planets. And one place that's packed and crammed with stuff. And what is this place? Well, it's the ascendant. So here is where we all are, the rest of us. And here is where the departed ones are, the ones that are connected to him by destiny, but they are not on earth. And it could be saints and inspiring masters of the past, or it could be his personal relatives, his father and his mother and all the rest of the people that are dead but that inspire him. And below the horizon here, it's the stuff that he doesn't know about himself, and above, it's what he knows about himself. So here's what we know about him from immediate experience of his being, the way it comes off to us. Here is what only he himself has a clue of, and the spiritual beings that are connected to him. Here is what he's clear about with his own being, and here is the subconscious. So here's the level of consciousness. Here's the conscious, here's the subconscious, here's the social, and here's the introvert, the inner world. So this is the constellation and the sign of Leo. In Leo, he's got Mars right on the ascendant. That is, the way it comes off to other people is like an aggressor, like an executive person, a person who is going to manifest something, and he's going to manifest it in grand style, like a lion. So what we see is an aggressive lion, an executive lion rather. Aggressive, yeah, because look at here, Pluto. Pluto is the planet of death. Death, destruction, departure, something is breaking, something is failing, something is not working, and it's not in him, it's in me. Something in me, my venture, my project, my business might just crumble to pieces when this guy comes along. Because he will manifest something, and he will do it in grand style. That's what we see, because that's on the ascendant. This is where we meet him. This is like his aura. And his person is this white center. But his sense of self is not in the white center, as you might think. His sense of self is in this center, because this is the sun. And the Sun, intimately connected to Uranus, which is an invisible planet outside of the solar system proper, which is Saturn and in toward us. Uranus and the Sun are joined up in one auric team in the constellation and sign of Gemini. And Gemini is being in communication. So he feels he's being in communication when he's centered in himself and being able to use logic metaphorically, like poetry, logic or poetic logic. So that's why he often comes off like he doesn't really, state something coherent, or he contradicts himself, or he'll be funny, logically or lingually funny. That's because of Uranus being connected so strongly to his sense of self in Gemini. So his sense of self is in Gemini, the planet or the constellation of relation, of comparison, of communication, of connectedness, connected to-ness. Now, from this sense, it rays out a sextile, which is very fast, a trine, which is nice and comfortable, but a little bit fast, especially in comparison to an opposition, which is like a wind in your face, although it perhaps is not as strong as these winds in your face, which are called squares. We'll look at them lastly. He has an interesting setup to deal with this opposition between the Sun and Uranus on the one hand in Gemini, and on the other hand, the Moon in Sagittarius. Now, the Moon in Sagittarius is, in Donald Trump's case, the most hidden, the most mysterious aspect. As an astrologer may think it's obvious, but it is not, because it's below his level of consciousness and it's behind where we're coming from. So it's in this quarter that's the least visible to us and to himself. That's where he has planted the Moon in Sagittarius, the constellation of ambition and goal. The Moon being your sense of life, your sense of flow and reflection, sense of where it's at, where it's vital. Where it's vital for him, where life is happening for him, is in aiming and shooting, in Sagittarius, in the archer, in going somewhere. That's what his life is about. Going somewhere, being something, accomplishing, anything, whatever. Just accomplish. That's good enough. There's not winning and losing, it's just winning. And that is supported by this trine, which is like a nice breeze in your back, between this Moon in Sagittarius, between the sense of life in the character of aiming for something, of ambition, that is connected with this trine, with this nice wind in your back, to Mars, to being executive in Leo, that is with grand style. So it's inevitable that he will try to accomplish things and he will try to do things, and he will be, in a certain sense, ruthless. Why? Because he's very gifted in executivity and the sense of self and the sense of logical poetry through this sextile, which is faster than conscience. So here's, impaced with conscience, but maybe faster than the rest of us, and here's faster than conscience. It's a trine and a sextile, which is a bypass between this a little more, hard, a little more strenuous opposition between Sun and Uranus on the one hand in Gemini, and the Moon in Sagittarius on the other hand. Well, there are ways to bypass this by going to executive Mars, and then really fast from Mars to the sense of self in the Sun, and the sense of excuses not to be formally logical in Uranus. But not only that, if that's not good enough, there's another sextile similar to this one, another bypass similar to this one, and that is this bypass. It's a trine between the Sun and the Pluto, no, the Sun and the Uranus, a trine to Jupiter, and a sextile between Jupiter and the Moon. Now, what is Jupiter? Jupiter is your sense of vision, your sense of potentiality, of this person or this project or this place isn't the way it looks like to the rest of you. I see what it can be. And seeing what it can be that is Jupiter, the jovial sense, is in the constellation of the scale of Libra. Now, Libra is justice. Libra is fairness. Libra is symmetry. Libra is a sense that, it all adds up. It all works out. Both in finance, in business, and, which is connected to Jupiter as well, business is the seeing of potential. And society at large, justice, law, legalism, all that. Seeing what that could be. That is a born politician. Now, his preparation was not in politics. His preparation for what he's doing now was in business. Building huge houses. That's also very connected to Jupiter. Huge houses, or huge as he would say it. That sense is very quickly, with the sextile, very fast, quicker than his conscience, connected to his sense of flow and sense of life in the background of ambition. And a sextile, completely in tune with life, but like a breeze in the back, with a sense of self and the sense of logical poetry, or poetic logic, rather. So here's the one bypass, and here's the other bypass, connecting the Sun, his sense of self, and the Moon, his sense of life and the way he reflects, which is, as we said, hidden both from himself and from us. It's right down there, tucked into the most secret corner of his soul, which is where we find the mystery of his being so incredibly ambitious. So, what is now here at the fore that we all see with him? Well, there are a few things in Cancer, in hominess, in a sense of, security and being at home and wanting to be at home. The way he builds his houses. Have you seen the Trump apartment? It looks like it's a fairy tale. It's all gold and classical murals, in infinitum, and absurdum. There's no end to it. It's lavish. It's lavished. Now, he has Venus there, the sense of beauty and home. But it also has Saturn there, which is a sense of strictness and discipline. And he can use that discipline in order to make it even more golden, even more abundant with murals and gilded doors. He also has Mercury there. He communicates by means of his home. He happily invites camera teams into his home. There's plenty of YouTube clips where he's being interviewed in his golden home at the top of this Trump Tower in New York City. A lot of us would never let people into our private home. For him, the private home, well, that's where Mercury resides. That's where he communicates. See, Mercury and his sense of self is not even in the same sign. They're kind of far apart for being Mercury and the Sun, at least. The Sun being in Gemini in the art of the deal, so to speak, in the sense of communication. And Mercury, the ability to communicate and the desire to communicate, is in the sign of Cancer, in the sign of home, of homeland, and of security, of his own Trump Tower, And that Mercury has a tough, a gnarly, a difficult, a squarish connection to Neptune. And Neptune is to the feeling life what Uranus is to your thinking life. Uranus is to logic, is what makes logic poetic, metaphoric. 2 plus 2 is not only 2 plus 2. It's all kinds of stuff that makes you able to think about 2 plus 2. Or rather, 2 plus 2 makes you think about all kinds of stuff. That's Uranus. Neptune does the same thing with the feeling life. Like, all that happiness contains a hidden amount of sadness. And all that sadness contains a hidden amount of happiness. Or of anger, or of shame, you know. Feelings hide within other feelings. And Neptune knows that. Neptune is not in a very personal sign. It's in Libra. So it's not about his own person as much as about how society should work, or how law should work, or how business should be conducted. He knows about the complexity of emotional signals when it comes to the art of the deal. Just like he knows about the potential of a deal. But this insight into the complexity of feelings is connected to communicability, to Mercury, with a square. That is, he has to work here. You know, this is hard for him. This is not easy. It doesn't just come by instinct. He has to make something good of it, or it'll be something bad. That's why he does not always come through. You have to want to hear what he's saying in order to hear what he's saying. But if you want to hear what he's saying, you can. And you can get convinced by it. You can get pursued by it. Here's another one of these hard lines here, of the squares. It's called a square because 4 of these you come full circle. So that makes a square. Just like this is called a trine because 3 of them makes a full circle. Thus, this is a trine. A sextile, you have 6 of them, you come full circle. So it's a sextile. But this is square. And the square between Mercury, communicability, or the desire to communicate, and Neptune, the complexity and the paradoxality of feeling, is something that, unless he does something really worthwhile with this, is going to be something that drags him down. Same thing with the joviality of Jupiter, you know, the sense of potentiality, and Venus and Saturn. Because they're Venus and Saturn in his chart are the same thing. That is, beauty, or even erotic beauty, and the sense of restraint, of discipline, of perhaps dominance or severity. They're both there. They're one and the same for him, and they don't really match up with his sense of potential unless he makes them. But he can make them, and when he does, it's beautiful. Another square goes between Neptune and Mercury. Another square yet goes between jovial Jupiter and Mercury. So he has to work here. He's very gifted. He has it from birth. He's a natural born, ambition, being executive, being in the sense of self. That's clear to everyone. That's just what he does. Or the sense of self and the sense of potentiality and the sense of ambition and life. All that comes by itself for him. What he has to work on is to communicate his vision. But if he does work and communicate his vision, it's there for us to see because it's all here in the foreground. And what's absolutely mostly in the foreground is that he's a doer with an ability to kill, a license to kill, if you will. A doer with a license to kill, and he will do all that with grandeur, with Leo. Although, deep down, he's really into relating. He's really into relationships. He's really into comparing this person with that person, this country with that country, this business with that business, anything with anything else. That's the atmosphere where he feels at home, where his sense of self is located. So that's now the President of the United States of America. And some of us are rightfully shocked and disgusted. Some of us are rightfully enthused and thrilled. Some of us are skeptically, carefully anticipating a new chapter in the book of human life on Earth. And whatever we think of it, he's there now in the cockpit, and he controls the rudder, and we're in the air.